Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Indian Council of World Affairs, I welcome you all to this panel discussion on India-Cuba relations, present trajectory and way forward, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Fidel Castro's visit to India. It is my privilege to welcome Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs and Culture, Government of India, to the Council. We begin our program with welcome remarks by Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, Director General, Indian Council of World Affairs, followed by special remarks by His Excellency Mr. Alexandro Simakas Marin, Ambassador of Cuba to India. Thereafter, the Honorable Minister will deliver the keynote address. There will be a short technical break, which will be followed by the panel discussion, in which Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former Ambassador of India to Cuba, and Professor Sonia Surbi Gupta, Professor, Latin American Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia University, Delhi, will make their comments. This would be followed by a question and answer session, which would be moderated by the chair. May I now request Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, DG ICWA, to kindly make her welcome remarks. Thank you.
Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs and Culture, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi ji, Ambassador Alejandro Miran, Ambassador of Cuba to India, Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan, Professor Sonia Saurabh Gupta, heads of diplomatic missions, members of the diplomatic corps, and all guests. A very warm welcome to Sapru House for today's panel discussion on India-Cuba relations, present trajectory, and the way forward. Earlier this year in January, Minister Lekhi had a successful and productive visit to Cuba. She called on the President, His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel. She was received by the Speaker of the Cuban Parliament and had meetings with the Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs as well as with the Minister of Culture. We are honored that Minister Lekhi has agreed to deliver the keynote address today, which would be extremely valuable in setting the tone for the panel discussion. This year marks 50 years since the first visit of President Fidel Castro to India in 1973. Significantly, this year the two countries are chairing multilateral organizations. India is the chair of G20 and Cuba the chair of G77. Channeling the aspirations of Global South into the G20 discourse was central to the Indian presidency. Prior to the G20 summit, Prime Minister Modi hosted the Voice of the Global South Summit, in which 125 countries participated. The purpose was that after these consultations, India would mainstream the interests and concerns of the Global South into G20, which eventually found expression in the New Delhi G20 Leaders' Declaration. Furthermore, African Union was included as a member of G20. India today stands as a trusted and a credible partner country in the community of Global South. Similarly, at the G77 summit held in Cuba, the key focus was on the interests of the Global South under the theme, Current Challenges of Development, Role of Science, Technology, and Innovation. India and Cuba have also articulated in their respective foreign policies the importance of multilateralism, and in this context, we have worked together, the two countries, in the United Nations and other international bodies on several economic, environment, and developmental issues. Bilaterally, since the establishment of diplomatic relations, over the last 60 years, a number of visits between the two countries have consolidated the friendship both at the political and economic spheres. President Fidel Castro visited in 1973 and later in 1983, both landmark visits in the bilateral relationship. In more recent times, the visit of President of India to Cuba in 2018 gave impetus to our ties. India is a long-standing development partner of Cuba. India's iTech program has been received well in Cuba and has also contributed to building people-to-people ties. The two countries have worked together in areas of renewable energy and agriculture, among others. In 2020, during the first wave of COVID pandemic, India provided medicines and other protective medical gear to Cuba. More recently, Panakia Pharmaceutical Company donated doses of pentavalent vaccines to Cuba, which had been announced by Honorable Minister Leakey during her official visit to Cuba in 2023. Interest in Ayurveda and Indian naturopathy is also increasing in Cuba. The present trajectory is good for our future relationship. Opportunities exist in health and pharma, biotechnology, innovation, as also culture. The panel discussion will be useful in identifying future pathways for the relationship. Thank you so much for coming to Sapru House, and we look forward to the discussions today. May I invite at this stage Ambassador Alejandro Miran, Ambassador of Cuba to India, to make his remarks. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Namaskar. Namaskar, everybody. I would like first to thank the Honorable Minister of State, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, who kindly always find a moment of her precious time to be with us. And I also thank the Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, Director General of the Indian Council of World Affairs, who together with her staff supported from the beginning this important initiative. It's a great honor for me to be here, and of course, all my gratitude to all of you, colleagues and friends, for being here with us. Today we celebrate and project our bilateral relations into the future, and we do so taking as the pretext the 50th anniversary of the first visit of the historical leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, to India in September 11 and 12, 1973. India was one of the first countries to recognize the young Cuban revolutionary government, and Cubans very soon identified with India's independence spirit and, of course, admired his culture, his history, and his noble people. We cannot forget our common history, nor those who built our ties and who were the first to open the path of friendship, collaboration, mutual respect, solidarity, and dialogue, and all on the basis of shared principles and values that have led us together to defend the noble causes in the world. In those years when Fidel visited India, a new world order was emerging, fighting against colonialism and neocolonialism, and for the independence, the right to development of the countries of the South. The movement of the non-alignment countries played a fundamental role, and Cuba and India had a common and relevant actions in this context. From those years, the world has witnessed radical changes, but Cuba and India continue to share and defend the same values and principles in the international and multilateral arena, and that have to do with the defense of international law, peace, international stability, the necessity of a more just and equitable world for all, the strengthening of the multilateralism, the democratization of the United Nations system, including, of course, the Security Council. Today, the countries of the South continue to fight to rid themselves of all the lacks of colonialism and underdevelopment and achieve the goals of the sustainable development. In all this battle in favor of the global South, Cuba and India remain together as two active and committed protagonists. We both reaffirm support for the global South, for the solidarity with these countries and the South-South cooperation. India is giving a greater voice to the global South within the framework of its presidency of the G20, and Cuba reaffirming his commitment as president of the G77 in China, whose summit we held 10 days ago in Havana, and which was attended by the Secretary West, Sanjay Verma, heading the Indian delegation. South-South collaboration represents a necessary space in which both countries can do a lot together for the benefit of others. To this end, Cuba offers its vast experience of international solidarity in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, and the Caribbean, and his human resources in the sector of medicines, education, and construction. We have a broad common understanding on the international and multilateral issues, which has led to traditional mutual support in many aspects of the international agenda, and in key organizations such as the General Assembly, the Human Rights Councils, and of course in the framework of the non-alignment movement and the Group 77 in China. An example of the above has been the support of Cuba to the Indians' candidacy for the Security Council. That is why we celebrate India's growing economic and political role in the international arena. For my country, which suffered a criminal and long blockade, international solidarity has been particularly valuable, and India has always been in the side of the justice by joining the United Nations General Assembly's resolution demanding the end of the blockade. In June 2022, Cuba and India reassumed the bilateral political dialogue through the visit to Havana of the Secretary East Saurabh Kumar. And then this year, we held consultations on multilateral issues with the visit of the Joint Secretary, MEA Joint Secretary Prakash Gupta. In our opinion, this has been a very useful and beneficial mechanism that we want to reinforce and that has highlighted the convergences of many points of the agenda. Since Fidel visits in 1973, the exchange of visits has been relevant. Fidel returned to India in 1983, and in Havana, he welcomed all the Indian personalities who visited us with a genuine feeling of friendship. The then Union Home Minister, Shri Rajnath Singh, led the Indian delegation to Fidel's funeral in 2016, while the then President Ramnath Kovind visited Cuba in 2018 and paid tribute to Fidel at the Santiago de Cuba cemetery. More recently, I must mention the excellent visit last January of the Honorable Minister of State, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, who was received by our President Miguel Díaz-Canel. Likewise, our President Miguel Díaz-Canel visited India in 2015, then as a first deputy president, and met with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two met again last August in South Africa in the framework of the BRICS summit. Cuba has always seen India as a friendly country, with which, as I said, we share many values and aspirations. That is why the bilateral relationship has been and is today a priority for my government. We have the objective in continuing to expand the official exchange and create conditions for the highest level authorities of the government and Cuban state to visit India, and we are ready for it. The bilateral trade and economic exchange has been lagging behind, and we are working very hard together in order to facilitate its increase. In commercial exchange, we work to bring companies from both countries closer together and eliminate the intermediaries that make this process more expensive and discourage it. We work to establish direct banking relations between the Central Bank of Cuba and the Reserve Bank of India, and to reduce the extraterritorial risk imposed on us by the financial blockade of the United States. In this objective, we consider it favorable the possibility of gradually introducing the Indian rupee as a means of payment. We appreciate the facilities created to import Indian rice, and we have decided to regularize this and expand these purchases. We also appreciate the facilities through Exim Bank to execute economic projects in Cuba in the sector of fertilizers, agriculture, medicine, and in renewable energy. Additionally, we have a close cooperation relationship with NTPC company that is supporting the execution of a project of more than 1,000 megawatts in Cuba. And we are a proud and founder member of the International Solar Alliance, and we have a very active and fruitful collaboration with the alliance. All this has made India a strategic partner for us in the renewable energy sector. Furthermore, I can announce our interest in joining the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure and the initiative to insert and develop millet in Cuba. We have a dynamic relationship in the biopharmaceutical industry sector where Cuba offers great potentials with high development and research capabilities. Suffice it to say that we have the only vaccines against COVID in all Latin America and the Caribbean. However, we believe that this still does not respond to the potential. We believe that there are high capacities for India to become a relevant actor in our economic development plan. We hope and work to see Indian companies in the tourism sector, in the mining, essentially in nickel and gold sector, agriculture, the sugarcane industry, the food processing industry, electric vehicles, and the information and technology industry. I would like to take advantage of this moment to make an advertisement for the next international fair in Havana from November 6 to 11 and call on Indian companies to participate and enrich the Indian pavilion that is being organized by the Federation of Indian Export Organizations. A special mention and thanks go to the ITEC scholarships, which has been a very useful mechanism, and we will continue to take advantages. On the other hand, we have a favorable legal framework in the field of health, Ayurvedic medicine, education, culture, and that we wish to put into operation and take advantage of it for mutual benefit. Cuba is a country with a high level of education and culture. Therefore, Cubans have the capacity to know, understand very well, and admire the Indian history and culture. In this way, we aspire to expand our cultural exchange and offer all the conditions for the creation of an Indian cultural center in Havana that will include all aspects of the Indian culture. We have taken steps with the Ministry of Ayush and the government of Kerala to continue updating the Havana Panchakarma Center, and very importantly, undertake collaboration with the All India Institute of Ayurveda to support the training of medical students in Cuba. On the academic level, I would like just to mention our interest to start a cooperation between this center, the Indian Center for World Affairs, and the International Policy Research Center in Havana, as well as putting into operation the cooperation between the Institute of International Relations of Havana and the Sushma Swaraj Institute of Foreign Service. By attaching importance to dialogue between both parliaments, I would like to mention the existence of a parliamentary group of friendship with India in our National Assembly. On the other hand, Cuba is present in the development of the Indian sports with the presence of several coaches, including two Cuban Olympic champions, and the Cuban coach of the boxing team with relevant results for India. Tourism is Cuba's main industry, and I can mention as an example that one Indian company currently manages 9 hotels in Cuba. We are developing a new strategy in this sector in order to create facilities for Indians to enjoy the wonder city that is Havana, the most beautiful beaches in the world, and the hospitality of the Cuban people. The relationship between our peoples directly and through different organizations has a high meaning for us. Here are organizations and some friends with a long history and to whom we have a feeling of gratitude. I would like just to mention, and maybe someone can stay beside, but I would like to mention the example of the Professor Sonia Gupta, who has been awarded the Friendship Medal by the Cuban government, the organization A Goal One Foundation, which does a beautiful job to promote the work of Jose Marti, and its president, Rami Singh, heads the jury for the UNESCO Jose Marti Prize. The National Solidarity Committee with Cuba is a historical and organic organization to which we owe eternal gratitude. Everyone has shown permanent support in our demand to lift the blockade. They have done many actions, projects, donations, all kind of them has been sent to Cuba. During these days, we have received multiple messages of solidarity in the face of attack that the Cuban embassy in Washington suffered just 2 days ago, that we consider a terrorist action, and that adds to the one that happened 3 years ago against the same embassy. At this point, I must mention that all of this occurs in the country from which all types of terrorism against Cuba have been organized. To make matters even worse, the same country has included Cuba into an infamous blacklist accusing us of terrorism. It is all part of the same policy of blockade, aggression, and hatred that stimulates these actions. We have always found friendship and solidarity in the Indian people, and to the same extent the Indian people will find it multiplied in the grateful Cuban people. Today we pay tribute to Fidel Castro and his contribution to our bilateral relationship. As you know, Fidel, like Cubans, we tend to talk for long hours. I think Fidel still holds the record for the longest speech, but I should not emulate Fidel, and in respect to him, the program, and the illustrious colleagues who accompany me. As you can see, there are many opportunities, needs, and challenges that are open ahead of us, and all that remains is to work together to materialize our will to project bilateral ties into the future. And we must do it then together, because we are coming from the same precept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. As Jose Marti, the national hero of Cuba, said, homeland is humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. May I now request Honorable Minister Meenakshi Lekhi to deliver the keynote address. Thank you.
Honorable Ambassador Ms. Vijay Thakur Singh, Ambassador Simankas, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Now I begin where the ambassador ended, that is mentioning Fidel Castro's longest speech. So I was just talking to myself and I said I'm going to be the shortest, because most of the bilateral relationship that we've shared over a period of 60 years and celebrating 50 years of Fidel Castro's last visit to this country, the technical aspects of it have been spoken both by Ambassador Vijay Singh and also Ambassador Simankas. But what I wish to share is that the meeting with the President of Cuba, President Bermudez, was sometime, in politics, I feel that politicians have an innate capacity to observe people and understand even non-verbal symbols. And the non-verbal symbol was that of friendship and warmth. And that is remembering and commemorating Fidel Castro, that his visit would have given Indians hope, friendship, and that continues in the hearts and minds of Indians even till date. And that's the feeling I got when I met the President. When I met the Speaker of the House, I met so many other ministers, including Foreign Minister and the Culture Minister. This strand of friendship and warmth continued. And I want to share that with everyone present in the audience today, that the warmth and friendship which Cubans have for India is something we all look up to, and I want to exchange the same, that Indians have a same feeling and thought towards all Cubans. We have stood by them at all levels. We continue the same friendship. And the last visit was also relevant because last visit of the president, the iconic president Fidel Castro, was about handing over the presidency of non-aligned movement to India, and that was I was not in college at that time. I was still in my last year of school, and I have those memories. I have all those pictures in my mind. So with a lot of ideas when you're growing up, you observe a lot of history, and all that comes back to you when you achieve certain age, and all that is coming back to me. Thus, I remember that moringa seed also, which was taken by the then president to Cuba, is adorning every household today. So moringa stood as a test of friendship and all the goodness that India has to offer. So goodness India has to offer is even medicine, which is little sweet and bitter in taste. So moringa became a household plant in Cuba because President asked the biotechnologists and scientists to understand the aspects, the medicinal aspect of this plant, and use it both in the culinary aspect and also formulations, the pharmaceutical formulations. Unfortunately, Indians have been using it for I don't know how many centuries, age old, centuries after centuries, prehistoric till now. But we never credited the plant with all the dues that that plant deserves. So the credits came from Cuba, by the way. And I must recognize Cuba for that, for understanding the hidden value that moringa had to offer, and that the seed of friendship also gets translated into the pharmaceutical, biotechnological cooperation between the two countries. And even during my meeting, I met several ministers, including the one in commerce and trade, the economy minister. And the idea was to expand the friendship into more mundane and material aspects of life, that how we can both benefit from each other by setting up joint ventures, by working together. And another aspect, since most of you are from the policy, I would say CDRI is another thing which we should work on, that this coalition of disaster resistant infrastructure becomes very relevant, which India is leading. And with all the sustainability goals which are being challenged on daily basis, and we know how climate change is impacting everyone's life, that's another aspect where we both can benefit mutually from each other's experience. And I know Cubans have done some really good work in this particular field, and they should become part and members of this particular coalition, because it will become relevant not just from the Caribbean perspective, which Cuba always works in, but across the globe we also end up getting benefited, because considering our expanse as a country, east and west and north and south, something or the other is happening at some end or the other. So we must work together on CDRI as well. And renewable energy, of course, the ISA, International Solar Alliance, is a huge success. But I want to add, just looking at Cuba, that maybe biofuel is something which we have recently started. Biofuel is also another aspect which we should work on, and that will benefit, because as long as humans exist, the organic waste also exists. And whether it's from the fields or otherwise, and especially with their sugarcane production and capacity to generate all organic waste, I think biofuel is another aspect where we should all work together, and with the scientific and other developments, these aspects will benefit both countries. And I would encourage everyone to visit Cuba. As Ambassador said, the beaches in Havana are great. Uh, I'm sure there are some very good hotels. And Ayush Center, by the way, in Cuba, is super. It's really good. Those who haven't visited must visit. That's recommended, because I did visit that place. The warmth and affection of the people is one aspect, but India has set it up, but Cubans are running it, and they are as Indians as you and me. So it'll be a good experience if people choose to visit even the Ayush Center. These are my impressions which I carry from Cuba. These are the areas which I would request everyone to work on in terms of collaboration and working together. Of course, I'm not getting into the line of credit, rice, etc. I don't wish to get into those aspects. Both ambassadors have spoken about it, but these are some ideas which I think we can work together for mutual benefit and building up our relationship. Of course, the G77 presidency of Cuba and G20 presidency of India, working together in multilateral institutions and also working for the reforms of the multilateral institution is a way forward, is the goal forward, which we both countries should enjoy working together. With these words, thank you very much, and my best wishes to India-Cuban relationship and friendship. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you, ma'am, for delivering the keynote address. We will now take a short technical break for 10 minutes to reorganize ourselves for the panel discussion. Thank you.